Episode 5.
If you expected the last 4 episodes of setup and exposition to be the slow part of Gun Gale Online and that the series would pick up now and get into the action, then you have seriously overestimated Sword Art Online. If anything, the show gets even slower at this point as it grinds through its distended midsection waiting for anything important to happen. Sword Art Online has always had big pacing issues, but in the first season a lot of those problems resulted from the way the series was adapted. The first book of the Aincrad arc told the entire story of everyone being trapped in the game, whereas the second book told a bunch of bonus stories about what Kirito was doing during certain major time skips. The TV series decided to adapt both at once chronologically, and while this made sense, it also killed the pacing by interjecting a bunch of random pointless side stories into what had at first seemed like an urgent and heavy storyline. Alfheim Online had less of an excuse, as it was obvious that the random conflict in the first half of the arc only existed so that the first book of the light novels could have its own climax. Meanwhile, Gun Gale Online's pacing fails in a totally new way. See, the thing about light novels is that they're typically very short, hence light, and most light novel adaptations tend to have one book equate to 4 or 5 episodes, sometimes even as little as 3 and rarely as much as 6. Yes, in some shows, certain arcs end up being rushed, and it can be nice to have a series take its time and flesh things out better, though I'd also argue that some shows trim the fat from the source material more than anything. Still, my point is that a light novel typically doesn't equate to a lot of anime episodes, yet the 2 books of Gun Gale Online were adapted into 14, and if you expect that it's gonna fill all that extra time with juicy details that flesh out the world and characters, then you have not learned your lesson yet. Gun Gale Online is a long, boring slog. It had no reason to take up 14 episodes. In fact, I'm not even sure it needed 7. Season 1's Aincrad arc had 14 episodes, and while I do think that arc could have easily been tightened up and a few episodes removed entirely, especially 5 and 6, it didn't feel nearly so stretched out. Reki Kawahara did say that the reason he never submitted SAO to the competition that he was writing it for was because the novel exceeded the word limit, so it's probably safe to assume that Aincrad was a bit longer than the average light novel. The Alfheim arc was only 11 episodes long, and even that felt like an overlong bore, but Gun Gale Online just takes it to a whole new level. I will admit that while watching episode 5, something clicked in my mind and I suddenly fell in love with the show's soundtrack. Maybe because I'd been blasting Yuki Kajiura concert footage all day leading up to watching it, or maybe because I was super shit-faced drunk and had the volume turned up really high, but either way, it happened. It's funny, because in spite of Yuki Kajiura being my favorite soundtrack composer, I didn't care for a lot of the music in season 1. This hadn't surprised me since Kajiura has done soundtracks that I didn't like before, but I don't even know if SAO2 has a whole new soundtrack or if it just finally grew on me. This revelation got me thinking about the Yuki Kajiura paradox. That is, the paradox wherein she is at once my favorite soundtrack composer and also the composer to literally all of my least favorite anime. Back in the early 2000s, Kajiura provided the soundtracks to a plethora of shows by Studio B-Train, including my favorite soundtrack ever for Dot Hack Sign. You know, that other famous but honestly not very good show about kids getting trapped inside of an MMORPG, which was conspicuously released just a few months before SAO first came out, but I'm sure Kawahara didn't rip it off in any way, shape, or form. B-Train is the worst anime studio in existence, and in fact I used to run an entire blog dedicated to hating the studio in a style very similar to these Sword Art Online videos. Writing for that website first taught me how fun it could be to rag on something which you really hate with the same passion that you would write about something which you really love, and that same spirit of fun-loving aggression is what I've been putting into all my SAO content. Funny then that most of the shows I've ragged on in this way have Yuki Kajiura soundtracks. Had she not also done the soundtracks to a bunch of shows that I liked, I would think it was some kind of curse. Anyways, this episode starts off with Kirito and Shinon signing up for the Bullet of Bullets tournament, and then Shinon dumping some more exposition about the game. Apparently, Gun Gale Online is actually owned and designed by Americans, but its Japanese servers are run by Japanese, which kinda conflicts with Kirito's earlier observation that GGO was the only Japanese game with professional players. The American servers for Terra Online are run by an American company called NMAS, but no one considers that an American game. Shinon also explains that because of the money transfer system and the fact that it's played across countries, it occupies a legal gray zone, which is why you can only manage your money transfers inside the game and the actual website only lets you create your profile. In other words, the money transfer system is totally illegal. This explanation probably happened when either Kawahara or the show writers realized while writing this story that collecting taxes on the money transfer system would be really difficult to figure out, especially if an American company was paying Japanese players. So they hand-waved it as the game being a legal gray zone, whatever the hell that means. I'm not saying necessarily that the existence of a game like this is unrealistic, but it's certainly a huge risk and only a matter of time before some kind of government crackdown or regulation starts happening. Like many things in this series, what makes this whole concept weird is that there was no reason for the game to be like this. If Kawahara or the show writers realized that their ideas were immersion breaking and made no sense, they should have just removed them entirely instead of trying to half-heartedly make sense of them. Next, we see Shinon in her underwear, and something about this scene made me feel really old all of a sudden. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not offended or anything by underwear shots, and I'm a far cry from someone who doesn't like fan service, but I couldn't get over the feeling that I'm watching a kids show and that this kitty fan service was just not made for me. Like, yes, if I was 14, I bet Shinon would have been my waifu and I'd be all googly-eyed over this, but as an adult, I'm just like, Jesus, put some clothes on. Frankly, I'm more offended by how Kirito can't keep his cool. This guy's been getting laid in VMMOs for years and he's flustered over a little underwear, but I guess we needed a reason for Shinon to start hating him from now on. By the way, this scene wasn't in the original web version of the novel, but was added to the published version, and I'll talk more about that later. Once that's over, they sit down in a cafe. Okay, fairly it's a lounge, but it's the same shit. Shinon explains the rules of the tournament and then says some shady stuff that makes Kirito suspicious. 13 minutes in, Kirito finally jumps into the first preliminary round. His opponent is a dude hiding in the bushes in full camo gear who stands up, making himself completely visible and alerting Kirito to his exact location, and then opens fire. And of course, thanks to the prediction lines, Kirito can easily dodge it. Shouldn't the guy have waited for Kirito to turn around, since the only way to shoot someone without them seeing your prediction lines would be to hit them from behind? And since he wouldn't have been seen if he had just stayed crouched? Whatever, I guess the guy's an idiot. Kirito gets hit twice in the leg, but it doesn't affect his movement at all. Earlier, we saw Shinon get one of her legs shot off completely, but I guess if you don't lose the limb, then taking damage doesn't matter. Sure would be nice if this game could decide on what level of realism it wants to convey. Kirito realizes that since the game tells you where the bullets are going to go, he can easily deflect all of the bullets with his sword, and since he's literally God, he'll be the first one who's ever thought of it. He uses his psychic new type powers to, I guess, hear the dude rustling in the bushes, and then charges him in what is probably the best looking moment of animation in the show, followed by the most hilarious case of awesome badness in the show. So after the match, Kirito is greeted by Deathgun, who they actually seriously gave a Darth Vader breathing apparatus sound effect. Well, yeah, I mean, Kirito's got a lightsaber, so obviously he's gotta be fighting Darth Vader. Hey, what made Darth Vader memorable again? Was it his menacing presence, the fact that he murdered his own subordinates, turned out to be Luke's father, and actually had a meaningful character arc across the original trilogy? Nah, pretty sure it was the heavy breathing. Let's make our villain do the same thing to make him extra scary. I'm guessing this wasn't in the original light novels, unless the sentence, "I heard his breath through some mechanical apparatus in a manner similar to Darth Vader," was in the book. Look, I don't have a problem with references and reincorporation. In fact, I often celebrate those things, but when you tack aspects of really memorable characters onto really unmemorable characters, it only draws attention to how weak those characters are in comparison. Deathgun is only threatening up to this point because he kills people and wears a spooky, scary skeleton mask, and now he's making Darth Vader sounds, as if thinking about how cool Darth Vader is will somehow help us to like Deathgun more. What had made Darth Vader's breathing so off-putting to begin with was that it wasn't how you would expect a villain to sound. It was a unique idea that hadn't really been done before, and that's an effect you could only ever get once. Copying it just makes Deathgun feel cheap and unoriginal. If they wanted to copy Vader, they should have copied his character arc, not his gimmick. Kirito realizes through this exchange that Deathgun is a fellow SAO survivor. By the way, if they ever made SAO survivor t-shirts, I will be on that shit. And also a member of the evil player killing guild Laughing Coffin. Alright, I can dig it. No, seriously, that's not a bad angle. A specter from Kirito's past who went insane during the time they were trapped in SAO? That's cool. Let's see where they go with it.
Episode 6.
While this was also true of Episode 5, with the exception of the big fight scene, Episode 6 seems to be where the production values of this season took a big dip. We've already had tons of reused footage popping up, and half the scenes feature stationary characters anyways, but Episode 6 opens with a wholesale replay of the last 2 minutes of Episode 5. Whether this was the result of the production falling behind schedule, or just a way to fill time in a series which shouldn't have taken up 14 episodes is a matter of speculation, though I suspect the former. I'm sure A1 Pictures has multiple sub-studios working on different shows at the same time, but they did launch this series alongside Persona 4 The Golden, Alden Noah Zero, Kuroshitsuji Book of Circus, and the still-running Fairy Tail sequel, not to mention releasing a Persona 3 movie and a Space Brothers movie around the same time. These guys are busy. Kirito starts off regaling us with the story of a big battle in which he teamed up with Asuna, Klein, and a bunch bunch of other Andys in a raid against the Laughing Coffin Guild back in SAO. What follows is probably the worst looking fight scene in the series so far, with lots of shots of characters just standing still in the background with sparks flying out of them, this horrible looping CG shot, and all these still panning shots of people doing nothing. I mean, sure, it could have been worse, and on the whole, SAO isn't that bad looking of a show, but hearing Yuki Kajiura music blasted over panning shots started giving me acid flashbacks to the old B-Train days. Likewise, Kirito starts having PTSD flashbacks, and that's actually kinda cool. That's characterization, maybe even the most this fucker's gotten in the entire series up until now. He's got something to be legitimately upset about, the fact that he knowingly murdered 2 other people and hasn't really owned up to it yet, and is being haunted by someone who did the same and is continuing to do so even now. That's a decent rivalry, and seeing Kirito so shaken that he actually wonders for a second if Deathgun might be one of the men he killed before realizing how illogical that is, while kind of funny, was also not a bad touch. Shinon sees something in Kirito's shaken expression that reminds her of herself, drawing a thematic link between them, and man, could this actually be going somewhere? Kirito is put into his second preliminary match and everything is ruined immediately. The enemy fires a flurry of bullets and they all miss, even though Kirito is just standing there. Great! This enemy has already proven himself so utterly incompetent that even if Kirito wasn't the greatest warrior on planet Earth, he'd still have nothing to be afraid of. Kirito gets super duper pissed off and gun katas his way to victory in what is somewhat unclearly a montage of matches. Shinon also gets a random pointless easy match for no reason. Next, Kirito and Shinon have a match together, and I swear to God, this scene was designed specifically to piss people like me off. The idea here is that Kirito and Shinon have both already qualified for the final round, so this match is just a formality. But they don't explain that before the match starts. Kirito decides that he doesn't give a shit who wins or loses since he's getting through anyways, and just stands there. And Shinon can't bring herself to shoot him because she feels like he's fucking with her. But they don't explain that before the match starts. It just looks for a minute like Kirito psychically understands that Shinon won't shoot him, and that Shinon is buckling under the pressure of whatever mental hang-up she's got going on. Maybe I'm being biased here, but both times I watched this scene I got really pissed off before they explained why Kirito wasn't dodging the bullets, and I'm still pretty pissed off now because I don't understand why they even had this fight to begin with if it was totally unnecessary. Oh, right, because this was the end of the first book and it needed to have its own climax, of course. Kirito and Shinon have a little heart-to-heart, then Kirito challenges her to a sort of quick draw contest. Once it starts, he chops Shinon's last bullet in half, which, in fairness, I've seen done before with real swords on airsoft pellets, so that didn't actually break my suspension of disbelief. However, I couldn't help but think back to the last episode wherein Kirito's sword melted a bullet on impact, and now it's somehow cleanly carving them in half. Yes, I noticed this kind of shit. Kirito closes the gap between them and are you fucking serious? Are you for real? This is your murdering pose? It looks like you're about to sweep her up and take her on your fucking honeymoon. You can't tell me this was done for anything other than some really weird fan service. He looks like he's going to make out with her rather than murder her. How can I be expected to take this shit seriously when it can't even take itself seriously? They're talking about the nature of true strength and relating their deep-seated personal trauma while he's holding her in a bed me stance. Hey, did you expect Shinon to possibly be a strong female character? Because not only does Kirito overpower her and borderline grope her, but condescends to her about how he doesn't like killing girls while he's at it. Why am I watching this?
Episode 7.
Ugh. In retrospect, maybe I was hard on episode 5 when I called it the start of the slow part of the show. Because this episode is the start of a new book, it decides to kick off with the tension down low again, and my god is it ever boring. It opens with Suguha, who I still give zero fucks about, revealing that she's figured out why Kirito is playing GGO. I wasn't aware that it was a secret, but apparently it is. We also get this exchange.
フレンドリストからキリト君が消えてるのに、私が気づかないわけないでしょ。
リストなんてそんな毎日見るもんでも。
見なくても感じるもん。
Lol, what? Next, there's a cute little scene of Kirito FaceTiming Asuna since they can't meet in ALO, because I guess he can't just make a temporary low-B alt account there for some reason. Why are your books so spaced out across your shelves? Asuna worries about whether anything's happened to Kirito in this new game, and thus begins a trend throughout this part of the show, in which every time Asuna is on screen, she says the only thing that makes any sense. I mean, yeah, I'm biased because I clearly like Asuna, because she's an oasis in the shitstorm that is this series, but it slowly becomes comical as the the arc goes on. In this case, she's offering to talk to Kirito about his problems or even join him in Gun Gale Online, but he brushes her off with a hand wave and goes back to obnoxiously flirting with his sister. Next we get a scene wherein Shinkawa starts to show his creeper side as he admits to being in love with his twisted vision of who Carne Asada is. She turns him down, although she does so in a way that suggests that she'll consider having feelings for him after she's sorted out her life issues, which is a dangerous way to tell someone like this off, but not an unrealistic one, and could foster some decent drama once we realize how crazy this kid is. Kirito continues to have PTSD flashbacks on his way to the nurse's office, and once he gets there, he and the nurse have a long heart-to-heart about whether or not Kirito should feel guilty about all of the people he's killed. By the end, the nurse has basically absolved him of all worries and buried his whole character arc before it even had time to take flight. To me, this scene represents the first big missed opportunity in creating what could have been a legitimately great sequel to Sword Art Online. Imagine if we restructured this entire arc to be about Kirito and Asuna jumping into this game together, or even Kirito jumping in first with Asuna joining later, and took out Carne Asada's whole subplot entirely. Instead of Asada tangentially relating to Kirito through her own past trauma, or this nurse character tangentially relating to him through the deaths that she's witnessed as a surgeon, Kirito could have shared all this emotional weight with someone who actually played Sword Art Online with him and experienced a lot of the same things, and also happens to be, you know, his lover. There could have been a dynamic between how each of them reacts to Death Gun, or how each of them feels about their time in SAO, and they could have helped one another cope and deepened their bond even further. A couple who continues to face new hardship and find new strength in one another. This would have been especially effective if we were following the story of the original web novels. As I've been releasing these videos, helpful commenters have been telling me all the reasons I'm wrong by pointing to the original novels, and while a lot of the explanations for things that make no sense in the anime are still pretty stupid, there's been a few major changes that really upset me. Most of them aren't even the result of the anime, but of converting the original web novel into the eventual published versions. I have no idea if these changes were Reki Kawahara's idea or if he was forced by publishers to make them, but the biggest, most aggravating change is that in the original novel, apparently Asuna actually does kill Kuradil, instead of Kirito stealing her thunder and doing it himself. Were it not for this change, not only would that scene have been far less frustrating, but we would know that Asuna also has blood on her hands, regardless of whether she did or didn't kill anyone during the Laughing Coffin raid. This would put Asuna in the same boat as Kirito, giving them even more reason to share this arc together. I mean, for fuck's sake, the nurse literally utters the sentences, "I can't take away your burden or carry it with you, I didn't play Sword Art Online." It's like they're tacitly admitting that she was the wrong character for this scene. Nothing else important happens for the rest of this episode.
Episode 8.
After some boring recap, Kirito approaches Shinon and literally begs her to give him yet another exposition dump. So after agreeing, she invites him to, you guessed it, this time everyone's having a big cafe exposition scene. That guy you forgot about from episode 1, that guy you forgot about from episode 2, and even that guy you forgot about from episode 4.
君たち応援してね
Kirito asks Shinon a bunch of questions about the tournament, which she says were explained in the email that Kirito would have received from the admins. Kirito says that he did read it, but that he wanted to confirm by having her explain it again. He may as well have said, yeah, but the audience doesn't know yet, so let's do some exposition. Bullet of Bullets apparently takes place on a 10-kilometer battleground with tons of different terrains, which sounds like it would make for a long epic battle of stakeouts and tactics, except it has a satellite that broadcasts your position every 15 minutes, so there's no camping. So everyone has to be moving around constantly, and you can't really find a place to hide and stay there, so there's no real reason for the battlefield to be enormous. If this got down to 2 people, I feel like one of them could just run around this giant map endlessly and never get caught, because both players keep learning one another's location. Once again, this reeks of taking a bunch of ideas that sounded cool and throwing them in together without consideration for balance. Shinon tries to escape this boring exposition, but Kirito drags her back, just like that one guy did in the first episode. He asks if there's any names which Shinon doesn't recognize in this tournament, and immediately concludes that one of them must be Death Gun. This scene leads to some instant hilarity for anyone who can read English letters. One of the minor twists in this arc is that Kirito and Shinon think that the 3 names are Gunner X, Pale Rider, and Steven. We can clearly see that the 3rd name is Sturban, which is German for to die, but Kirito and Shinon don't realize their mispronunciation until much later. Had they realized that the name was German, they might have connected it to Shinon's friend, who plays under the name Spiegel, meaning mirror. This is another one of those things that would probably seem seem less idiotic in the novels since they wouldn't have to show us the name written in English letters, but even then I find it funny that these kids can read English well enough to know that it almost says Steven, yet totally read it wrong. I also can't wait to hear how they're gonna handle this in the dub. Kirito then tells Shinon about his past in SAO and how a player killer is in this game, and we get to see a lot of recap footage again. This cafe scene lasts a grand total of 8 minutes before Kirito and Shinon step into this elevator, and what? Is that the shot from Evangelion? The one with Rei and Asuka, one of the many iconic shots from that series. It's framed a little differently, read worse, but it's definitely the same shot. What a strange, meaningless callback. 13 minutes deep, the Bullet of Bullets finally begins, and we get a several-minute montage of pre-established characters murdering hapless Randys. Shinon's about to put Mustache out of his misery yet again when Kirito gets her into another sex pose, cause why not? Fuck it. Mustache gets wasted all over again by Pale Rider in another legitimately good-looking action scene before Pale Rider gets stun-locked by Deathgun. Kirito explains that he had been underwater when the satellite scan happened, so apparently the scan hadn't detected him, which Deathgun is also using as a tactic. That would be kind of cool if it didn't instantly negate the whole purpose of the satellite scan, which was to make camping impossible. As long as you time it so you're always underwater when the satellite goes by, you can stay hidden all day. And for Deathgun to already know this trick, it means that past participants know this trick, which means that everyone should know this trick. The episode ends with Kirito begging Shinon to hurry and shoot Deathgun, although it might have made more sense to shoot Pale Rider, who is incapacitated, thus removing him from the game and ostensibly harm's way, but whatever.
Episode 9.
Back in Alfheim Online, the Spurned Women's Club are all watching a live stream of Bullet of Bullets in, wouldn't you know it, a cafe. All of them are splooging their fucking panties over how great Kirito is, including Klein, who I'm pretty sure is just as in love with him as any of the others. He did say Kirito was cute back in the first episode of season 1. Good thing they found an excuse to show more recap footage. And now, my friends, we come to the scene that finally broke this entire arc for me. I mean, other than the 9,000 other things I've already talked about, but this is the first really big one. Something so immersion breaking and stupid that it put a crack in my skull just trying to wrap my head around it. Deathgun murders a man on fucking camera. So okay, let's take a step back for a moment. Kirito was sent on a mission into Gun Gale Online in order to confirm the existence of Deathgun and find out if it's possible that Deathgun is really killing people. That's it. That's his mission. It's not to fight Deathgun, it's not to win the Bullet of Bullets, it's a quest for information given to him by a government agent. Kirito already has reason to suspect that the character with this avatar is Deathgun and that he's a former player killer from Sword Art Online. Hell, he's even convinced that Deathgun really does have the power to kill people by the time he's about to pull the trigger on Pale Rider. So Deathgun murders a man. It's obvious that's what happens because when he shoots him, it only takes out a speck of his life, yet the man starts convulsing in possibly the most hilarious death scene ever. I guess they didn't want to hire a voice actor just to make death noises. Pale Rider is marked as disconnected, and then Deathgun brags to the cameras that if he runs into you, he will bring you true death with his gun. What the fuck? Even if we don't immediately assume that Pale Rider has just died in the real world, it's pretty obvious that some kind of foul play is going on. Why did Pale Rider freak out like that? Deathgun seemed to know it was going to happen. Is he cheating? Did he use a hack? Even if we assume it was staged, it still seems like cheating. More importantly, Kirito not only has reason to suspect that Pale Rider was just killed, but he should have some kind of direct line of communication to a government worker who suspects that Deathgun might be killing people. Can Kirito not contact the world outside his headset? Because if not, ew, creepy, once again, I can't imagine ever playing one of these games. But even if he can't, he doesn't have a reason to be here anymore. He could just disconnect, tell the nurse that's the guy, and have the government agent contact the authorities to check out Pale Rider's house and contact the game administrators to have the tournament postponed so they can investigate, and maybe have Deathgun's character suspended. But no, none of that happens. Deathgun just murders a guy on air and no one does a damn thing. Even after Klein realizes that Deathgun's slogan, "It's Showtime," was the slogan of the old Laughing Coffin guild leader and tells the girls, no one does anything. They keep bringing up how Kirito and Shinon can't figure out what Deathgun's name is because he's always off the radar when the satellite goes by. But are the names not displayed on the live stream? And why can't you see a player's name just by looking at them in this game anyways? That seems like a really asinine plot convenience. Everything about this entire setup seems like a really asinine plot convenience. How much shit does this show expect me to try and buy into just to keep following along with its ridiculous plot? How many rules which serve no purpose other than to push the plot along am I going to have to accept to keep any suspension of disbelief? See, that's the problem. There is no no anchor with this series, no ground on which to gain your bearings. The entire world, the whole setup of Gun Gale Online as a game is built around the narrative that Kawahara wanted to construct without ever attempting to work as a setting on its own. I can't imagine any reason why names would be hidden in an MMORPG except that it makes for a convenient plot device. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to sense or communicate with the outside world in any way. No reason there should be a satellite to prevent camping, which you can easily avoid. No reason that Deathgun can just kill a motherfucker on camera and get away with it, except that it makes for a convenient plot device. This is the fundamental flaw at the heart of Sword Art Online, and it's why the show fails on such a basic level. It's why I can't get invested in the setting or characters, because nothing in the series feels organic. Everything is forced, broken, and a huge insult to my intelligence. And if I wasn't mad enough, right in the middle of the episode, out of nowhere, there's this fucking atrocious action scene, wherein some ugly Randy pops up and opens fire on Shinon and Kirito, only to get completely fucking destroyed with zero effort. Hey, I guess this really is just like Star Wars. Episode 2, with Kirito whipping that fucking lightsaber around like nothing fucking matters. 14 minutes in, once again, Asuna says the only thing that makes any sense and decides to log out and go contact Kirito's employer for answers. We'll come back to this though in another episode. After Kirito acts like a condescending dick for a few minutes, he and Shinon rush to the incorrect conclusion that Gunner X must be Deathgun because, I don't know, they're stupid. Deathgun then gets the drop on Shinon because apparently he's got an invisibility cloak. Well, okay, I guess the water thing was just a misdirect, which might have been cool, except now the question is, why doesn't everyone have an invisibility cloak? I guess it could be an ultra super rare item, but unless Deathgun is literally the only one who has and or knows about it, you would think everyone would be after one of those, since it's game-breakingly powerful. I mean, this isn't like Halo where you can see the invisible person if they're moving and invisibility only lasts for a few seconds. Deathgun was totally undetectable and could conceivably just hunt everyone down and completely destroy them. Apparently, as Deathgun explains in a monologue seemingly directed at Kirito who isn't there, Deathgun wants to kill Shinon in order to send Kirito into a blind rage to prove once and for all that he's the real Kirito from SAO, even though earlier in the series we saw that Deathgun was deliberately targeting Shinon already. Shinon recognizes the gun as the same model which she used to kill the bank robber in episode 3, and the episode ends with a fake out fade to black as a gunshot signifies Shinon's possible death. This brings us to one of the worst scenes in the entirety of Gun Gale Online, but we'll get to that in the next one.
What's up, motherfuckers? Did you enjoy that video? I did not enjoy making it anymore. I want these to be over. There's still 2 more parts coming though, so have fun with that. By the way, if you want to leave a comment on this video, you'll notice the comments are closed. There is a place to leave comments. It's linked in the doobly-doo, but the reason I closed it is because I get a lot of really ignorant, stupid comments from people who obviously haven't watched the video, or at least haven't watched the whole video. That's how it's been on the part 1. So I figured I might as well just make it so you either have to read the description or have to actually watch the entire video to figure out where the comments are. So there you go. Go find them. Go have fun. Go do the thing that you gotta do with the bitching and the moaning or the celebrating. I know a lot of you like these videos, that's why I'm still doing them, obviously. And of course, if you really like the videos, then patronage is always appreciated. Donations are as well. Helps me keep this channel running. And look forward to the other 2 parts of this. Now that I've got the Devu helping me to edit them, they should be done before the year is over.